evening, everyone, our distinguished guests and the esteemed panelists. It is our pleasure to convene this evening's discussion on the topical issue of the India-Bangladesh relations at the crossroads, what happens next. This event is a collaborative effort between the Indian Futures and the India Habitat Center, and we are honored to have a panel of renowned experts who will provide insightful analysis and engage in a nuanced discussion on the complexities and opportunities that characterize the India-Bangladesh relationship. Tonight's dialogue aims to facilitate a deeper understanding of the current dynamics and future prospects of this critical bilateral relationship. As our panelist, we have Ambassador Veena Sikri, former High Commissioner of India to Bangladesh, and after that we have Lieutenant General Syed Hasnain, former GOC 15 Corps and 21 Corps, and also the Chancellor of Central University of Kashmir. And this discussion is being chaired by Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee, the President of India Habitat Center. And she was also an ambassador of India to the Netherlands from 2010 to 2013, and also she has also worked in UNESCO from 2004 to 2010, and she has also published several books, and this discussion will be introduced by Dr. Manish, the founder of the Indian Futures, and also a professor of diplomacy at Jawaharlal Nehru University. So now I am handing over the podium to Dr. Manish Dabhade, and over to you, sir.
Namaskar and good evening to all. We have assembled today for this panel discussion, India-Bangladesh relations at the crossroads, what happens next. And I think it's truly the relations are at crossroads, because what we have witnessed in the last few months is a massive disruption in bilateral ties. I mean, all of us, in fact, who can really actually forget Hasina, then Prime Minister at Prime Minister Modi's swearing-in ceremony, followed by a very successful bilateral summit in Delhi just a few weeks later, in June, obviously, last year. In fact, I wrote a piece with one of my very bright students on the Hasina Modi summit, the Highway of Strategic Partnership, which was published in the first post. And I will look at where we are standing today. Bangladesh, in fact, is a central pillar of Prime Minister Modi's neighborhood first policy and activist policy, and obviously a very central element of Indo-Pacific strategy as well in some ways. Looking back, I think all of us, or many of us in India, were actually shaken when we saw Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's statue pulled down. And in fact, at one level, we witnessed the soul of the state shaken and fallen. And I personally would not hold back to say that it was really an Islamist takeover of some sorts. Let's get that very right. And of course, at one level, as a student of foreign policy and diplomacy, what we are also witnessing is a reversal of Bangladesh's foreign policy vis-a-vis India. Today's session, in fact, is totally dedicated and has diplomacy and security at the core. Ambassador Sikri and General Hasnain, in fact, they have been speaking since last few weeks on many aspects of the Bangladesh crisis that confronts the state and even India. But this is really going to be focused on diplomacy. What we are witnessing is Professor Yunus, in fact, leading a very hostile, irrational regime, not a legitimate government as many would describe it. Most important worrying sign, obviously, are the Hindu minorities under attack, and that's the most important challenge to India. And we were also discussing how far India can go to raise this issue in Bangladesh. What we're also witnessing since last August is also rise of extremism and terrorism forces in Bangladesh, and very importantly, linkages to Northeast insurgents. So what we are seeing is a real, clear and present, I would say, challenge, not a danger, to India in a range of domains, especially in the Northeast. So and that is where I think some key questions can be raised how did, for example, India get here? Why did we get, were we caught off guard? And what are going to be the diplomatic pathways and strategies ahead? Hasina obviously is in India. There are extradition pressures. How long can India resist these? Very important external dimension is about China and Pakistan opening a new front in the east against India. What does that mean for India's security planning? We also can't forget that Trump is taking office in just a few days. So US is a very important player here too. And can we identify arenas where India and the US converge and where they diverge? And at a fundamental level, I think, let me end here with pointing out that will geography and economy and culture trump the whole domain of religion and ideology, resulting in anti-India sentiments which seem to have taken over in Bangladesh? So let me stop here and hand over to Ambassador Mukherjee, and let me again, as always, thank Ambassador Mukherjee for turning India Habitat Center into a very vibrant cultural and intellectual hub, and giving opportunity for the Indian futures to collaborate with them on very timely conversations. And it's great to have with us Ambassador Veena Sikri and Lieutenant General Atta Hasnain. Truly an honor, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Dabhade. To begin with, I'd like to first welcome the new president of RIS, Ambassador Sanjay Verma from the Foreign Service, who's just taken over. I invited him to come. I thought it would be a good opportunity for him to see how we organize these events, and of course, belonging to the Foreign Service fraternity. That makes it even nicer. This discussion on Bangladesh at the Crossroads is very timely. It is very important to understand what the partition of Bengal actually did to the Indian psyche. And in that, I'd like to quote William Dalrymple, who said that partition is central to the modern identity in the Indian subcontinent, as the Holocaust is to identity among Jews, branded painfully onto the regional consciousness by memories of almost unimaginable violence. In a sense, 1947 has yet to come to an end. That is as true of the partition of Punjab as it is true of the partition of Bengal. But there was one very important difference between the partition of Punjab and Bengal, which I have explained in detail in my book on Bengal partition, which is that the partition of Bengal was based on a false understanding by the Muslim League, which ironically was controlled by the leadership on the eastern part of India, in my part of India, East Bengal, and they were lulled into feeling that the Islamic identity is more important than the Bengali identity, culture, identity, and civilization. But very soon after 47, when Jinnah announced that Urdu would be taking over from Bengali in schools and universities in then East Pakistan, the language movement started. It resulted in the Pakistani army actually causing one of the greatest genocides in that part of the world. And the formation by Mujib, who, let us not forget, always considered till the very end Sohrawardi as his guru, and Sohrawardi was a great communalist. And when Sohrawardi died, he used to go regularly to look at his grave because he's buried there. Finally, he was buried in what is now Bangladesh. But Mujib himself switched his vision from an Islamic identity to a Bengali identity, recognizing that if there is one thing that unites all Bengalis, it is the culture, the religion, the football, the history, and the civilization. And there's one more very important difference, which is, as I realized when I worked for 6 years at the Center for Human Rights in Geneva as the chef de cabinet of Ibrahim Afal, a Muslim from Senegal, former foreign minister and education minister. Ibrahim Afal told me one day in French, he said that in Islam, there are two types of citizenship within the religion. I said, you mean like a caste system? He said, no. It's based on color. So I said, what do you mean? He said that the first-class citizens of Islam stop at India. All those who go beyond India, that is Indonesia on one hand, Bangladesh and Africa, are all second-class citizens of Islam. So I said, you're telling me this when you are a black practicing Muslim? He said, yes, you must never forget it. When I researched my book on Bengal partition, I understood what he meant, and I called him up. He now lives in Dakar. Because the pattern of conversion in Bangladesh to Islam was fundamentally different from Punjab. In Punjab, you had people who converted who were either fair-skinned North Indian Rajputs, Brahmins, etc., or those who came from Central Asia, etc. Whereas those who were converted from the period of the Delhi Sultanate onwards in what is now Bangladesh were agrarian labor, dark-skinned, lower caste, fish-eating, and who had no interest in reciting the Quran in Arabic. They still recite the Quran in Bengali, which is why I say that they may pose as much as they want as first-class citizens of Islam, but ultimately their salvation lies in going back to that Bengali identity, their secular identity, the identity of language, history, culture, and civilization, which can never change, just like they cannot change the fact that they prefer eating fish, preferably mustard fish, to having kebabs, to speaking Bengali rather than speaking Urdu, and to reciting the Quran in Bengali rather than in Arabic. I'll leave the floor open now to my two very distinguished colleagues. I'm so glad that they are here. And when we talk of Bangladesh and at the crossroads and what we should do, we should first begin by remembering this, and we should understand that there are certain limits beyond which India will not be pushed. Today we face a very serious situation in our eastern border, in our northeast. We are actually, for the first time, encircled by the east and northeast problem more than the west. And that is a visceral threat to the core territorial integrity of India. That is one of the most dangerous situations facing India today, is this false Islamization. And let me conclude by adding that although it was Henry Kissinger who sent the 7th Fleet in 1971 with the instructions to bomb and destroy Kolkata port, the Americans of any color have had huge difficulties in accepting the partition of the East, the creation of Bangladesh, and there are many questions asked about who is this Yunus, where has he come from, is he also going to disappear? I certainly hope he does. Back into the wilds of California where there's a wildfire going on. Will he stay on for long after Trump takes over? That's again another very interesting conundrum. We have with us a very important author, Ambassador Rajiv Sikri, who's written on strategic conundrums. I would suggest that maybe in volume 2, he talks about only the strategic conundrum of the East with the help of his wife, Ambassador Veena Sikri. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for setting the ball rolling for today's discussion. And let me also welcome Ambassador Sanjay Verma, who's just taken over as chairman of RIS. President of RIS, and Ambassador Rajiv Sikri, a very distinguished diplomat. Great to have both of you with us today evening. So may I now request Ambassador Veena Sikri.
Good evening, dear friends. It is a great pleasure to be here at the Habitat once again. And I must congratulate Master Bhaswati Mukherjee, President of Habitat, for organizing this and for organizing so many other excellent talks where I have been actively participating as well. It has really livened up the scenario in India, the discussion, the intellectual gradient quotient, as it were, and we're all enjoying it thoroughly. Thank you so much, Bhaswati, for that. And thank you for including me in this. Well, I think that when we look at the question of India-Bangladesh relations at the crossroads, I suppose the first question that comes to one's mind is India's neighborhood first foreign policy and the importance of this policy in the context of Bangladesh and with Bangladesh being the kingpin of India's neighborhood first foreign policy in the entire region. So we are dismayed to see the events that have unfolded in Bangladesh over the last 6 months. But I would like to say straight off at the beginning that India's neighborhood first foreign policy remains. It will remain as a very important aspect of India's foreign policy, and India has been very careful that, as soon as the events took place, we've always been very careful to reiterate and re-emphasize that we want to continue the bilateral relationship, which is based on the shared aspirations of the peoples of India and Bangladesh for peace, security, and development. I think to understand how we have reached the situation here today at the end of 6 months after it happens, I think we have to maybe look at a little bit, take off from where Bhaswati stopped at 1947 and the partition of Bengal, and to say that, the West Pakistan government never really accepted East Pakistan as an equal partner, for whatever reasons, as Bhaswati has mentioned so strongly. But they were very exploitative. It was just a new colonial manifestation for the East Pakistanis. There was the British earlier, and now there was West Pakistan. So it was quite natural for the people of East Pakistan to express their displeasure, to raise their voices, the formation of the Awami Muslim League, which later became the Awami League. All these are very natural developments. But these were based very much on factors which were really non-religious. It was like the economic factor was very strong. The Bengali cultural identity was very strong. And that is how they fought for this. And that is how the battle was so successful, because everybody in Bangladesh, all the religious minorities, the Hindus, the Buddhists, the Christians, and they were a very large percentage at that time, because in the partition of the subcontinent, in the east, whereas in the west, Pakistan made very sure that from Punjab, almost everybody left and came to East Punjab and other parts of India. But in Bangladesh, the partition was much slower. It was cruel. There was a lot of cruelty, which has not been documented very well. Some people have written wonderful books about it, but it's not really very well known. It was very cruel. But the people stayed on. The people of East Bengal, the Hindus, the Buddhists, the Christians, they cherished their land. They were very attached to their culture and where they had grown up. They didn't want to leave. And so they were there, and they participated fully in the partition, in the Liberation War of 1971. And without this full and united partition, without this full and united struggle for the Liberation War of 1971, it could not have succeeded. Because when India, when the 10 million refugees came to India and the Indian army started looking at all the options, we had one big group of people in East Pakistan who were unanimous in wanting to get rid of West Pakistan and be independent. Of course, the Liberation War was successful thanks to the joint command of the people of East Pakistan and India. But there's one important point, that West Pakistan never left East Pakistan. And this is, I think General Hasnain also made this point later, and he's going to talk about it much more, because they just never left. They were there, and even then they talked, Bhutto spoke to Sheikh Mujib in January 1972 of a federation, let's have a federation. And they were there at all times to disrupt the life of East Pakistan, of now Bangladesh, and to actually in any way break up India's friendship with Bangladesh. And when in West Pakistan, you had President Ziaul Haq bringing in the Islamization in the army and in society, this got reflected very much in East Pakistan as well. And this Islamization began creeping into East Pakistan more and more, into Bangladesh, of course, at that time, more and more. I think this is an important point to remember, because now this is the plea of the people who have done the revolt in August 2024, are basing themselves on religion now. They are not even bothering to talk about a Bengali identity, because they're busy wanting to push out the non-Islamic people of Bangladesh. The Buddhists, the Hindus, the Christians, that is the first target of their attention. And it was the same in 1971 when the war took place. The talks broke down. Yahya Khan left Dhaka, and he told the Pakistan army to start Operation Searchlight. And their first target was arrest Sheikh Mujib, take him there. Second target was go and start killing the Hindus and intellectuals. So this is what they have, this process they're trying to complete now in 2024, going on as we speak, 6 months after that event. So this is a very important fact. When Sheikh Hasina got elected in 2024, in January of last year, exactly a year ago, for her consecutive third term, 2009-14, consecutive fourth term and overall fifth term as Prime Minister, it was really something which disturbed the West Pakistan government enormously, and you saw them acting more and more through the army of Bangladesh, through the use of Islam in the army of Bangladesh to influence the people against Sheikh Hasina. Almost the first event you had in Bangladesh was the BDR rebellion. The BDR, the Pilkhana incident, when the army, the officers were killed. And this was going to be a big threat for Sheikh Hasina. She surmounted that. She reached out to the army. She, worked with them very closely. And then 2011, there was actually another rebellion for the Islamization, calling for more radicalization in the army, the Islamization of the army. Again, Sheikh Hasina surmounted it. And we saw that she came out of all this. But in this time, in 2024 August, this was, I would say, almost a global effort. You had, the Jamaat-e-Islami became the focus of the effort this time. Jamaat-e-Islami has always been the conduit of Pakistan, and they took over the leadership of the revolt that in August 24. And you had a Jamaat-e-Islami led military coup. I call it a military coup because it happened through the army. And although General Bakr Zaman was appointed by Sheikh Hasina just a few weeks before the 5th of August 2025, but in the end he could not or did not want to assert himself and agreed that Sheikh Hasina should go. So I think it was a Jamaat-e-Islami led military coup, supported by Pakistan, backed by USA, with China in the know. I mean, it's a kind of a combination of factors that has made the situation much more complicated after it happened. Bringing in Yunus as the chief advisor was to give it a global face, to give it a secular face, to give it a face that was be globally accepted. You had lists and lists of other Nobel laureates writing to Muhammad Yunus, congratulating him on what he had done and telling him he's going to have a great time, etc. But this hid the real power behind the throne, which is the Jamaat-e-Islami. So this Jamaat-e-Islami, backed by Pakistan, is the same combination of forces that lost in 1971. And now they think they have won, and they're determined to reverse whatever happened in 1971, so that we are back in the pre-1970, back in the pre-1971, 47 to 1971 period. And there has been a very senior defense analysis from Pakistan, who has actually even written about this and said that this is now 2 countries, 1 nation. This is what he has described. This is their aim, to make it as 2 countries, 1 nation. I think this is the factor that has brought the India-Bangladesh relations to the crossroads. Now this is the factor. Now they want to go back to exactly, you had the 2-nation theory in 47. 1971 was considered the end of the 2-nation theory. We are now seeing a reinstatement of the 2-nation theory. I think this is what is Pakistan's objective, and this is what we have to combat, because we know that how difficult it was for India in between 47 and 71. And I myself, who was High Commissioner between 2003-2006 in Bangladesh, when there was Begum Khalida Zia as the Prime Minister, supported fully by Pakistan with Jamaat-e-Islami as an alliance partner. This was exactly the same situation prevalent there. So I can very much visualize exactly what is going on. Now, how are we going to combat this? I think we have to retain and understand the two major factors that are there in our neighborhood first foreign policy: shared economic development and shared security concerns. If we can understand and bring together the economic development factor and the security concerns factor, then we will be able to do it. But with this Jamaat-e-Islami-led regime, this will not be possible at all. Because what they have done in the last 6 months, and 180 days is going to be completed on the 5th of February, in 180 days you can see that they have tried to change everything against the constitution of Bangladesh. They're trying now to get a new constitution for Bangladesh. They want a new proclamation. All that is completely against, it is illegitimate, it is unconstitutional. And I think that accepting this for India and the world will make it that much more difficult. Because if you say, okay, we will deal with them as they are, 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line, you'll have another regime coming in who will do the same thing for different reasons. It might be a more Islamized regime, a more fundamentalized regime. You might have a, this is what they want. They want Sharia law. They want an Islamic state. There have been tweets by some of the advisors in the government that we want a caliphate. We want Sharia law. We want, that, and even if you have a civil war, we'll have a civil war. So I think that we have to understand that any such disturbance within Bangladesh, a continuation of this is very difficult for India. Okay, so I think this is what we have to realize is why we are considering ourselves to be at the crossroads. When we talk about what next, we have to understand that we will have to reassert or have to talk to the world, talk to President Trump when he comes in, the constitutional reality of Bangladesh, the 1972 constitution, which has worked very well for 53 years, and where you have democracy, nationalism, secularism, and socialism as the four principles. We've had, now this government has got reform commissions, they have brought in new factors, they're talking of pluralism instead of secularism, but really speaking, they have no authority to change the constitution of Bangladesh. That can only be done by an elected government. So our focus has to be now on getting free, fair, and inclusive elections. The present regime is trying to leave out the Awami League altogether, isolate them, pretend they don't exist, kill as many of them as possible. They're trying to push out the Hindus, Buddhists, and Christians. But the Hindu, Buddhists, and Christians this time, for the first time in 53 years, have not taken their usual path out and come across the Indian border in large numbers. They have taken a stand. They've taken a stand that we are citizens of this country, we want to remain in Bangladesh, we want our rights. They are participating in large rallies. There's a new group called the Sanatan Jagran Jyot, which has prepared an 8-point demand for Mohammad Yunus's government regime. The Mohammad Yunus regime pretends these demands don't exist. They're very reasonable demands. They want a law for protection of minorities, the Ministry of Protection of Minorities. They want their places of worship should be protected. They want that all the beastly violence and destruction and vandalization and desecration of temples and killing of people that has been unleashed on them, the people should be identified and persecuted. Very simple demands, but the government doesn't want to talk about it. They are pretending that none of this happened. They're calling it a creation of India's media, calling it Indian media propaganda. So I think that these are the issues on which India has to take a stand. And I don't think that this constitutional, unconstitutional, illegitimate government, this government cannot hold the next election because they have not done a single thing that is constitutional. You really need, the army is the only factor of stability and authority in Bangladesh. They were the ones who authorized the interim government to be sworn in. When this hasn't worked, despite 5 months or nowhere near the election, you can have a new, non-party and neutral, caretaker government, which this government is not. It has Islamists as members as advisors. So they really, from every point of view, have really jeopardized their own right to run the government. And when you have a neutral government who should have within 90 days call elections, whoever the elected government is, India is prepared to do business with them. India is prepared to continue its neighborhood first foreign policy as strongly as before. And India is prepared to talk to them on the same way that we have with others. It is wrong to say that we only wanted Sheikh Hasina. We want stability, prosperity and democracy for Bangladesh. And we are prepared to do it with any government. Sheikh Hasina worked very well with India because she recognized our security concerns. And for the last 15 years, after the years when I was there, when there were terrible problems with Northeast India, in the last 15 years, after Sheikh Hasina recognized India's security issues, that we do not want any Northeast insurgent groups which will affect the security of India and also not be good for Bangladesh. So she recognized that. She recognized that fundamentalism, radicalism, Islamic terrorism is no good for Bangladesh, no good for India, no good for anybody. So she had that. These were the basis on which we were able to promote the economic development, and Bangladesh grew at 6 to 8% a year, got out of the whole least developed country status, and has a tremendous win-win relationship between India and Bangladesh. We would like to restore that relationship, but it has to be in a Bangladesh that allows all parties to exist. Awami League, BNP, well, if Jamaat-e-Islami fulfills the criteria laid down by the state, fine, they can also combat. Radical groups should be banned, and we look forward to seeing that. We look forward to once again returning to a Bangladesh which believes in secularism, liberalism, democracy, and nationalism. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Sikri. I think that was a brilliant address. You obviously started with pointing out how Bangladesh is the kingpin of India's neighborhood first policy, and how the recent developments have caused utter dismay in India. But very important pathways, diplomatic pathways you have identified. First is obviously talking about our shared security and economic development concerns. If we have increasing conversations on that, I think that would really take the relations in a positive direction. And also India needs to emphasize more and more on the conduct of free and fair and inclusive elections. So I think that really sets the stage for further rounds of diplomatic conversations. And I think at one level we also need to understand the Yunus problem, that I mean, people refer to him as an economist, and let's not forget that he also had his own political ambitions way back in 2000s, and had floated a political party. So Yunus is not some saintly-like figure. I'm sure there are aspects to what I mean, so we need to get that very clear, that what we are witnessing is actually what Ambassador Sikri pointed out, that crafting a new republic altogether. I think that is what we are witnessing right now. So, but with that, thank you very much, ma'am. And now I request Lieutenant General Hasnain to present his remarks, sir.
May I
Over to
speak
you.
from here?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Jai Hind to everyone. It's always a pleasure speaking with the lady ambassadors. In Habitat, Ambassador Veena, Sikri and I think this is the second or third time that we're speaking on Bangladesh. We're going to be speaking in another 4 days' time once again together. I'm not going to repeat anything which has just already been said, more from the diplomatic side in particular. You are expecting me to speak on security, so you will expect me to start with military threats, etc. Let me tell you, I'm going to talk about an aspect which usually is not spoken about, and that is hybrid threats. It is hybrid threats. Now, we have really got a serious problem on our hands, and it's almost akin to 1971. The only thing was in 71, Pakistan was splitting up. This time, Pakistan is fusing. Right? It is fusing, coming back together, and many times fission and fusion both create equal problems around the world. Right? So that's what we are facing at the moment. So I'm going to start not speaking about military threats or things like that in the beginning. Economics. Let me quote from Nikki. On the 16th of January, that's a day, yesterday, a report which has come. Some really revealing facts. 4 Kia Group apparel factories closing shop very shortly. It's been blamed on current market instability and inadequacy of raw material and work orders. Abdul Khalik, an owner of the Kia group has 2 cases against him for misappropriating $43 million through abuse or power. He's an Awami League man. 44 apparel factories with 20,000 workers have been shut down in the first 7 months of 2024. 32 more have shut down after August, 5th of August last year. And 31,000 workers have been laid off. I can go on. And there's a whole list of it. Manufacturing growth has come down. Service sector growth has come down. The foreign currency reserves from $39 billion, the high has come down to $15 billion and coming down even further. Inference. When economies start nosediving, one of the major things which happens is jobless poor are the easiest to radicalize. So you see the connect between radicalization and the jobless poor economies. These people become more susceptible to migration. And this is the threat which we have to really counter. Right? We are not looking at military threats here, we are looking at threats of migration. The first to resort to violence. Normally, you will find poorer, impoverished segments will resort to violence. They can be exploited in countless ways. We can keep the feeling that these people deserve it. A lot of people say, okay, see, these conditions, these people have called upon themselves. But remember that if we want peace in our part of the world, then we'd better do something about this to overcome, to neutralize this particular factor. I may just request you to recall the problems of migration of Bangladesh. Of course, it started a long time back. It's been happening in the 60s and the 50s also. But the real trigger for a migration happened in 1970. Cyclone Bhola. 540,000 people died in Cyclone Bhola. It just ravaged the countryside. You know how many helicopters Pakistan had kept in Bangladesh for relief operations? 3 helicopters. 3 helicopters in a situation where 540,000 people died. In 1990, 130,000 more died in another major super cyclone. Every time that Bangladesh has been ravaged, when its economy has been ravaged, we have felt the brunt of it in our country. That's why the migrations are always started. So you are at the moment seeing a situation which is akin to Syria. You saw the implosion of Syria, 24 million people in Syria. When Syria imploded, you had the economy also imploding. 24 million people, you found 4 to 5 million people moving into Europe. The effects of that were told in New York, in Brussels, in Paris, in Madrid. That's how the cascading effect of these kind of things happens. This is all hybridity. This is hybrid conflicts, hybrid war, hybrid threats. So you got a situation where 2 failing states on either flank of India are working in sync with each other. Perhaps as a deliberate irritant to us. Have you seen the photograph yesterday of the Bangladesh army delegation visiting Pakistan? Yesterday? Being received by Asam Munir in Pakistan and being feted. Who is it that photograph meant for? It is meant for us, to show us. See, we can do this to you. It's showing us the mirror. Radical orthodox forces have infiltrated everywhere inside Pakistan. The government is weak, we are aware. No credibility. The CEO, Mohammad Yunus, is almost throwing in the towel. He cannot be supported by us because internally we can't do that also. Internal security capability to control the situation within Bangladesh is also highly suspect. The army chief, his credibility itself is suspect, related to Sheikh Hasina. Seeping orthodoxy is taking place in the army also. So it's just a matter of time. Disenchantment with the movement may set in. Now 6 months, as we just recounted, 6 months. Disenchantment could come, but that disenchantment has to be triggered by something. And that gives us a window to bring about that kind of a disenchantment. Pakistan will continue to, of course, sustain it. Now, what kind of scenarios can therefore come about? Many things can happen. From an army takeover, which is the least of the evils, less likely though, or a radical, a Jamaat takeover with an army backing, that would be something very, very serious to look at. Yunus could be deposed, but his presence perhaps keeps the Western backing intact with him. Worse scenarios could take place, and those scenarios are, which I can outline for you, terror attacks within Pakistan, within Bangladesh and outside, cross-border terror attacks. And in the subcontinent, when Pakistan is advising someone, let me tell you, copycat terrorism is a very common thing which the Pakistanis do. So which is the easiest attack to copycat as such, or to copy as such? The Hamas attack, 7th October attack. Can you imagine a situation where you find a terror attack taking place from within Bangladesh into a portion of West Bengal where you have 1,200 people killed? What will India react with? I'm giving you the worst case scenarios to you as to what can possibly happen. We need to wargame these kind of situations, which we have not done adequately yet, to my mind. The Jamaat has launched the Amar Bangladesh party, led by Mujibur Rahman Manju. It may not draw attention in elections, if elections take place at all, but it remains the rabble-rouser in chief, the Jamaat, at the moment. Student bodies are very influential and have tasted power. These will not stand down easily. They lack experience and they have been infiltrated hugely by the Jamaat. So we need to be in touch with all. In this situation, we can't say that we have to go back to the Awami League. We cannot. We have to be in touch with all, but must not leave the Awami League in the cold. At some stage in the future scenarios that we can outline, the Awami League will come back. And therefore, that is the kind of situation we should prepare for and try and trigger a situation towards that. Economics I have already explained to you. Let me look at the geopolitical and the strategic part of it. The main player, the United States. What it wanted to achieve with what it has done, if it has done that, is something that all of us are trying to fathom at the moment. What will be the Trump approach to this? We still do not know how Trump will respond and react to this entire situation at the moment. Pakistan is obviously the main villain and is seeking opportunities. It has never left the shores of Bangladesh. From 1971 onwards, it's always had a sleeper content inside Dhaka, inside Bangladesh at most times. A question came to me in the tea time as to why did India fail to detect this? Well, obviously, we were aware of what things are happening here. But the kind of intensity and the kind of speed with which it happened was difficult for us to perhaps assess completely. And may I remind you also that for the better part of 6 months before this event on the 5th of August, our attention was focused on Jammu. And was that therefore a deliberate attempt by Pakistan to divert our attention onto the Pir Panjal and the Jammu region? The entire attention of the media and the nation was entirely in that area at that particular time. Now, for Pakistan, the deterioration of India-Bangladesh relations is like music to the ears, right? Remember, there are 10 infantry divisions in the Bangladesh army. All of a sudden, out of the blue, you add 10 infantry divisions to your adversary's force levels. It's something to really think about. You have a northeast threat, you have the Siliguri corridor threat, you have trans-border attacks, you have the confidence of a Chinese backing, which Pakistan hopes to probably guarantee to Bangladesh, and there's a nuclear hang behind Pakistan's actions. So this security situation which has developed in this hybridity is much more serious than what one can actually fathom. What can we do in this kind of a situation? Our interest is to prevent the consolidation of the radicals. One of the most important aspects is to make sure that radicalization of every form is not allowed to solidify and allow Bangladesh to become a failed state. A failed state with a radical content and a radical leadership is absolutely lethal for us. We have to work towards early elections as already recommended. Democracy is the only perhaps way, but the lesser evil among the various options would be a potential Bangladesh army takeover. Because I think out of all the elements in this entire thing, a saner element is still the Bangladesh army, although we've had past experiences of it not being as sane as we may assess it to be, but under the current circumstances, it seems to be the best. For us, I think an important aspect is track 2. If track 1, I think the government of India is doing a very good job at the moment with this track 1 of keeping things quiet. No hyperbole, no kind of a rhetoric, and that kind of thing. Very quiet diplomacy has gone on. Just sent our foreign secretary there to feel the situation, explain things there, etc. The targeting of Hindus, targeting of the minority, were major concern in India. This is something that we have to keep looking at all times and keep expressing our concern about it. Track 2 is one way by which we can engage with some of the more sane elements, the saner elements inside Bangladeshi society. We also have to engage with the Bangladesh army. Track 2 is about veterans, diplomats, military people, scholars, academics. Bangladesh army, we can even have a direct track 2 with them, because lots of us have served with the Bangladesh army in the United Nations. We have lots and lots of friends there. I have personally got many friends in the Bangladesh army. We must strengthen our border posture. With clear mandate to the border security force, we have had major problems on the borders in the earlier years, if you remember. Let the BGB not feel empowered and as if it is a much stronger force or anything of that kind. We must make sure the border security force feels completely empowered. My last 1 or 2 points, perhaps. Economic. Now, this is a contentious thing. If you find a completely failing situation, do we do anything to try and ameliorate that? That is a debate which we need to look at. Is it something which will be in our favor, or will it be something completely against us? When you look at Pakistan, you wouldn't even think of engaging Pakistan economically. But with Bangladesh, could we do it? It's something for us to debate about. My last point. I think one of the very important aspects of this whole situation is psychological warfare and social media contacts. Right? This is something we have not been doing sufficiently, and we need to do much more of it. Refining the Indian narrative and strongly mentioning it through the media, promoting the joint legacy of the Bangladesh army and the Indian army, togetherness that we achieved in 1971. Islam in India, moderate Sufi Islam in Bangladesh, subtle references to the economic benefits that Bangladesh has benefited with Indian assistance. The aspects of disaster assistance to Bangladesh. If you could also temper media, all our media outreach which we are doing through the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, think tank links that we could establish, and negate all the kind of corrosive statements which keep happening from time to time. Because on one hand, the government is playing the right, absolutely the correct stance is taking. Unfortunately, from the public side, from the media side, unfortunately, some negativism may lead us not to be supporting the government policy. Lastly, I think this entire effort of psychological outreach, social media, etc., needs to be played out by one organization in a kind of an umbrella pattern with everything under it. I don't know what kind of an organization. The Habitat Center itself could be an organization for that. Or any of the think tanks, major think tanks, the Vivekananda International Foundation, the India Foundation, any of them. But we need to actually have a formalized system by which we carry out our outreach to the other side. Thank you. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. Yeah, in fact, it was you brought out some very important points, including the fact that the greatest danger is the hybrid threat of migration, and you made a very interesting, slightly controversial recommendation that an army takeover may be better for us than a democratic takeover. I'm sure you did that. I'm sure you did that deliberately to get a good audience response. In one of your earlier lectures, which I attended, you made one very important point, which you might like to come back to in the question and answer session, which is that when you worked out the actual threat scenario, you said that according to calculations by strategic army generals on our side, the Bangladeshi 10 divisions would need to be countered by 30 divisions from the Indian Army, and the total number of divisions the Indian Army has is 40 divisions. 45. So that is something which, for a lay audience is very interesting and important to know. So when we open up for question answers, you might like to come back to that. And also come back a little bit to the nuclear threat, because in my perspective, in such a heavily populated area that is Bengal, East and West, the nuclear threat may not be useful. Let's not forget that when the Americans decided to test their nuclear weapon, they deliberately selected the nation of the yellow Japanese so that the white man was not affected. That was their calculation. Whenever they want to do something nasty, they always go to the land of the black, the yellow, and the brown, so that the whites are never affected. Here, if there is even a small nuclear weapon used, it would affect a very large number of people on both sides of the Bengal border. That is something you might like to come back on.
Can
that.
I give a small clarification there? When we refer to nuclear threats, we never talk of nuclear weapons as weapons of war fighting. We talk about them as weapons of deterrence.
You talk of them as deterrents.
Deterrence, nothing else.
You talk of them as deterrents, exactly the way the Americans and Russians did. They called it they had a very cute word for it. It was called MAD, Mutual Assured Destruction. MAD. That's the wording we used to use. So I would like to move over with the approval of Professor Dabhade to the question answer session, because both of you have made some very interesting propositions, and we don't have that much of time, about 15-20 minutes. So the floor is open, and I'd request my colleagues from to pass the mic around. यहाँ पहुँचा दीजिएगा. And please, when you speak, please give your name and make it a question, not a interrogation or a lecture, because we don't have much time. So take 3 questions at a time.
Sure. Thank you for considering my question. I'm Shresh Sharma, Research Intern at Center of Geoeconomics for the Global South. My question for Ambassador Veena Sikri is that even though India has provided assistance to Bangladesh consistently after post-1971, what is the key reason why the Bangladeshi public has never had a very pro-India sentiment in the recent times? And why have we not seen this support for India as well in the administration either? And a question for Lieutenant General Syed Hasnain would be, while Mohammad Yunus is trying to play a tightrope act between the US administration and China right now, can this tightrope act end when Trump administration comes into power? And in the future, can India present itself as an alternative to these 2 countries? Thank you.
There's a gentleman behind who's asking. Thank you.
Yeah, Madam Sikri, I think Sheikh Hasina did a mistake not to offer that island to US. If that was done, she would have been still there. And second thing is that now, General, sir, do you think Pakistan and Bangladesh will be reunifying, or what will happen?
We'll take 2 more questions.
Can I?
Yes, please. Please go ahead.
Sorry. My name is Vinay Kumar. I've been an international development expert. My question is to you, Madam Sikri. I think you brought out a very comprehensive explanation as to how Bangladesh has reached this situation. But my sense is it seemed like slightly one-sided, because I think Sheikh Hasina has been in power for almost 20 years. And that was a long period for any regime to institutionalize and to create, a culture in the country which was different from what was being infiltrated through the Islamists. So would you have some thoughts on why Sheikh Hasina failed the way she did?
Thank you. The last question is here. यहाँ दीजिए. यहाँ पर. Please identify yourself.
Myself, Avi. My question is with Ambassador Veena Sikri, ma'am. As you earlier made the statement that West Pakistan never left the Bangladesh. My question is that why did the masses of the Bangladesh accept that and they protest for the pro-West Pakistan regime? In 1971, they protest against that regime. But now why they protest for that pro-West Pakistan regimes? Thank you.
I think both our panelists said it, and the wording used was using sleeper cells. In other words, when you're out of power, you keep the sleeper cells and then the sleeper cells get activated when the ambience becomes favorable towards using those sleeper cells. I think that is the way it was used by both panelists, but I'll request first Ambassador Sikri and then General to respond. Yeah, Veena.
Okay, thank you for all the questions. The first question is about assistance to Bangladesh, that we have given so much to Bangladesh. And I think that's very true, and I think you see all the prosperity and development and growth in Bangladesh. Certainly it's a mutually beneficial aspect, because we also got our connectivity going to the northeast, using Bangladesh ports, Chittagong port being used and Mongla port being used by us to access the northeast. It's been a very good factor. I think the bulk of the benefit for the Bangladesh people is there. It is there, and what we are trying to say is we want to build upon that. What we are combating right now is that as part of the build-up to this plan, there's a very vicious anti-Indian propaganda linked with Sheikh Hasina herself. Now, Sheikh Hasina's own internal unpopularity, and you mentioned about somebody being there for 20 years, the other question, the last question, and we're taking her first term also. So the question is that the anti-Sheikh Hasina, because in Bangladesh, among the Bengalis, I must tell you, they're very strong anti-establishment feeling always. They want turn by turn. And in fact, when in 1990, I must tell you, when both Sheikh Hasina and Khaleda Zia fought together against Ershad to bring back democracy, and he agreed, among themselves said, okay, we'll do it turn by turn. That was like the agreement between them, and it worked for a while and then, of course, broke down. So the anti-establishment feeling against Sheikh Hasina was at an all-time high. And the fact that the BNP did not participate in the elections was blamed on Sheikh Hasina. Actually, if the BNP had participated, they would have got elected. So I think what they were able to do is to associate this anti-Sheikh Hasina narrative with the anti-Indian narrative. And so India was blamed for everything that Sheikh Hasina did, because India is supporting Sheikh Hasina. We always said we want any government who will recognize the interests of India. What you need in a good neighborly relationship is to recognize the interests of India, of your neighbor. If you don't recognize the interests, both will be destroyed. And this is what we want. We want the shared interest to be recognized. And the effort of Pakistan has been always to destroy that recognition by saying that India is the hegemon, India is destroying your interests. So I agree with you. I think one thing we need to persistently do in Bangladesh is to have a huge pro-people program. We do have it. Students coming from there to India, judges coming to India, but this new government does not want it. They cancelled the judges' visit. They cancelled even the BSF, BGB talks. Everything. They just want to cut off relationships so that they can build up their own narrative, which is an anti-Indian narrative. But we need to be very wary of that, and we need to build up the pro-India. And I think coming to the question about St. Martin's Island, I do not know whether that was a trigger. I mean, that was the USA has never had good relations with the Awami League government. They can never forget what happened in 1971, how the American army, the American support for the Pakistan army was completely defeated. Nixon, Kissinger, and what they did in favor of Pakistan. But still, there is no doubt that the situation in Myanmar will play a very important role. The Arakan army, them having taken control of the state of Rakhine and having defeated the Myanmar army in that entire state. So now a lot of the entire Bangladesh-Myanmar border is controlled by the Arakan army. And even a lot of the India-Myanmar border in the entire Rakhine state is controlled by the Arakan army. So this has changed the logistics of what is happening in Bangladesh, in Myanmar, and by turn in Bangladesh. The radicalization of the Rohingyas in Bangladesh is a very serious problem. You have Pakistan very active with organizations like ARSA, ARSA, Arakan Rohingya Solidarity Organization, and also the RSO, Rohingya Solidarity Organization, Solidarity Army and Organization. So we do have the radicalization of the Rohingyas and the victory of the Arakan Army in the Rakhine state where the Rohingyas live. This has created a new complexity there. We do know that America is very interested in having a foothold in Myanmar to counter the Chinese influence. So the control of St. Martin's Island, I see that going to the Arakan army very soon. Very interestingly, just 2 or 3 days ago, I saw there was a report of a huge fire in St. Martin's Island, and all the public infrastructure built to receive tourists has been destroyed. 3 major hotels and so on. So I think you're going to see a change there. You're going to see that implication is going to be, we don't know how it will work out. Let's see what happens after 20th of January when Trump comes back. I think the question of the last question on the pro-Pakistan attitudes, the pro-Pakistan attitudes, this is something that they've worked for and which has now come to the fore. The Jamaat-e-Islami taking control through their students wing, the Islami Chhatra Shibir, has meant that they're trying to control the universities. They've changed all the vice-chancellors, they've changed key professors, and so they're trying to control the universities, control the youth vote. But actually, I think this is having a reaction in Bangladesh. At the end of 6 months, I can say that there are many in Bangladesh who are now saying that it was better earlier, better under Sheikh Hasina. Because the kind of control that the Jamaat-e-Islami wants, I don't think in Bengal, in East Bengal, in Bangladesh, you will ever have that kind of control. They will never fall in for that kind of religious control, that kind of pro-Pakistan control. It will not work. So as time is going on, we're seeing that this is not working as it will, but they want to have a proclamation, they want to declare it as a second revolution, second independence, all that. I don't think eventually the people of Bangladesh are not going to buy it because their dependence on India is so huge on an everyday basis. If there's a 5 rupee difference in the price of sugar and the price of salt, it starts moving this way, that way. It's a very interactive border, and we have right now controlled it because, I think the people of Bangladesh will soon realize the impact of this control. But the pro-Pakistani influence is not going to last, in my view.
Thank you so much. Can I request?
Thank you, ma'am.
And you could also tell us about how many.
Yeah, I will talk about
how
that.
many battalions we need to teach them a lesson.
Right. Your first question, the aspect, can India be an alternative to the United States and China? India has had its chance for the last 54 years. Right from who helped them to get their independence? It was India. India should have been the shining star. But I was horrified when 44 years later, in 2015, I went and addressed the Bangladesh National Defense College and found that I was the first Indian Army general who had come to address them. So obviously, you see, our narrative playing was not correct. We didn't understand, we didn't take it beyond. We thought a military victory embedded us and gave us a kind of a conflict resolution in a manner which terminated the whole thing in our favor. It did not. As we are saying, Pakistan never left Bangladesh. The sleeper cells were always there. Right. The second issue is we have a congruence of interests with the United States. US and India have a congruence of interests there. Right. Now, whatever has happened this time has obviously been without consultation with India. The United States seems to be very comfortable with promoting a radical narrative inside Bangladesh without understanding where will this terminate, where will this go. They have tried this in many parts of the world and nowhere have they succeeded. Right? They could have consulted India much more and that congruence of interest could have carried on. That has unfortunately not happened. As a result, now interests are frittered. We don't know which direction Bangladesh is going to go, but we need to work much more to ensure that it comes in our direction. That's number one. Your question, sir, on the reunification of Pakistan and Bangladesh. Well, it got split up on the basis of Bangla nationalism, right? Language, culture, faith, ideology, religious ideology were not joiners, were not something which were integrators as such. So, can all this happen that your history is reversed all over again? There are trends around the world where you find Islam is trying to bring all this together and things like that. I think the power of nationalism is far stronger. Although, let me tell you, my experience in Dhaka University, when I spoke about Islam, and I was doing a very dangerous thing, speaking about Islam in Bangladesh, right? I spoke there was a professor who asked me, what are you talking about Indian Islam and Indonesian Islam and Bangladeshi Islam? Islam is only one around the world, there's only one Islam. I said, I'm sorry, I don't agree with you. Indian Islam is very different, right? And I think Indonesian Islam is similarly very different, right? But Bangladeshis don't understand it from that angle. So I think The point still remains is that I don't think ideologies can bring about fusion of nations separated by geography in the manner in which Bangladesh and Pakistan are separated. What they are attempting to do at the moment is create pinpricks around India here and there. I don't think this will go to any successful termination as such. My last issue on the question raised by Ambassador Bhaswati ji. You see, when an army is there, first of all, I did give this example last time when I started off humorously by asking the audience, are you aware of what India calls the Pakistan forces when we do exercises on our sand models? The brigadiers here, what do we call them, sir? Red line? No, we call them NARC. We call them NARC. NARC is the forces of hell. Okay. What do we call the Chinese? Chandal, the forces of the devil. Right? What do we call the Bangladesh forces? Nothing. Because they're friendly forces. But they're friendly forces. So we never call them. But Bangladesh has a name for us. They call us Foxland. Foxland. Chatur Bharatiya. Right? Which just shows attitudinally. This is to explain to you, we have never perceived a threat from Bangladesh, but Bangladesh has always perceived a threat from us. Despite the fact that we joined hands to get them independence at that time, which they don't acknowledge. And we also don't want to sort of throw it up to the air all the time. There are threats. There are threats to our Siliguri corridor. You know, the very narrow piece of territory there, right? There are threats which are hybrid nature. In Northeast, most of the terrorist groups, there are 34 terrorist groups inside Manipur itself, with whom we have got various, Caesar of operations, etc. Many of the leaders of those groups live inside Bangladesh, from Assam, from Tripura, other parts of the thing. So this threat has always been there. 10 divisions are there in name, but today now translated suddenly into an adversarial nation, these 10 divisions can be force multipliers for our enemies. Because 10 divisions can do a lot of harm to you. I'm not saying that we are going to get inside Bangladesh. 30 divisions are required for offensive operations. But if you want to defend yourself, you will require at least that much force to hold here in our side. No. Normally, madam, the mathematical rule is that when you are attacking, you do 3 times more. If you do in the mountains, it will be 9 times more. Right? Here it is plain riverine terrain. So if you take it to 71 war, Pakistan had 4 divisions. We launched about 9 to 10 divisions. And with that, we won the war completely. Right? They had no air power at that time completely. So this is how you look at it. So suddenly, Pakistan, you see how the scenario in the subcontinent has changed. We had Pakistan on one side, and if you've got our strike elements and this, that, all along the western borders, suddenly you have Doklam. Suddenly you had Galwan. You had problems all along the LAC. Huge amount of forces went away to the north, denuded the west. Now you got a threat coming up in the east. You got to pull out forces to keep it in the east, or the forces which you were expecting to come from the east to the west will not come anymore. So you are now only in a holding capacity against the western adversary. This is how your security gets, hampered.
Thank you very much. We don't have time for any more questions. I suggest we discuss with the panelists outside. I'd like to thank both the panelists and Professor Dabhade. I'll just give him the floor. And to say that it's really a pleasure to have diplomatic and military strategists together, because they give perspectives which actually in a way complement each other, because diplomacy cannot do everything. You need military strength. Military strength cannot do everything. You need diplomacy. So I think that's a great combination. We should continue with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Mukherjee, for very graciously agreeing to chair today's session, and Ambassador Veena Sikri and Lieutenant General Hasnain Saab. It has been a fantastic round of discussion, and I think what we are actually witnessing in these months is actually a crafting of new history, and India needs to, which came out very clearly from both the speakers, distinguished speakers, that India needs to be much more pragmatic about its engagements, and In finality, I think, I mean, in recent conversation with which the U.S. National Security Advisor, the outgoing National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan had with Yunus, he made it very clear the focus should be on stability, prosperity, and democracy. These three pillars should be the, modus operandi of engagement between, obviously, he was referring to U.S. and Bangladesh, but I think Ambassador Sikri also pointed out that India needs to be focusing more on the question of getting democracy back in Bangladesh, and we are completely also have to take into account the Trump factor, and Trump did tweet very strongly on the, I was just checking again, 31st of October, strongly condemning what is happening in Bangladesh. And thank you all for taking time out to be here today evening. Let me also make a very brief announcement. Next Friday, we are in fact also hosting another panel discussion on the Trump 2.0 opportunity for India. Same time at 7 p.m. So please feel free to join in if you're around. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.